Hey guys, welcome to Catalyst Online. We are so grateful that you've chosen to spend time with us today. Hey, my name's Jason. I'm one of the pastors here at Catalyst, and I just want to thank you for hanging out with us. And if you are kind of new to the whole Catalyst Online experience, we would love to know that. We would love to be able to celebrate the fact that you're choosing to spend your morning with us. And the way you can let us know that you're joining us today is by doing this. Text Catalyst SP to 97000. When you do that, you're going to get a link texted back to you for what we call our Digital Connect card. And you can fill out all the information you want to on that Digital Connect card and return that to us. You can let us know if you have any questions about the church. Maybe you want to get involved somehow. Maybe you want to talk to a pastor. Maybe you have a prayer request that you'd like to share with us. That's a great resource for those of you that are new to us. Also, if you've been joining us for a long time online, same thing. Text Catalyst SP to 97000 is a great resource for you as well to let us know what's going on in your life and let us know if there's any way that you would like us to reach out and connect with you. So thanks for being here again. Take advantage of that resource. Hey, we really only have one big announcement to share with you this morning. And that is that Easter is coming. You guys probably aren't surprised at that, but Easter's coming. It's going to be April 4th this year, and our exciting announcement is that we're going to be doing Easter live outdoors at Ebell Park. We're super excited about this opportunity that we've been given the green light to do here in town. Significant on multiple levels. One, we get to share the gospel message of Jesus Christ with you and your family and the people that you invite. The other thing is this. It's an opportunity for us to go back to our roots. Our very first service ever as a church in Catalyst was held on Easter at Ebell Park 10 years ago. So we get to celebrate a lot of different things that day. And we're super stoked that we get to have this service. It's going to be a really cool celebration of Jesus and what he's doing in your lives and what he wants to do in your life and what he's doing in our community. And we need your help pulling this service off. So if you would like to join one of our several teams that we have to make Easter at Ebell happen this year, text Easter SP to 97000, and you're going to see the different options for getting involved in our teams, whether it's pit crew, whether it's VIP tent, whether it's greeting, setup, tear down, a lot of different ways that you can get involved in our Easter service at Ebell Park. So make sure you text Easter SP to 97000 to get involved. Not only do we have Easter coming up, but we got a great week of celebrating to do in the lead up to Easter. We're going to be holding 2 live in-person Good Friday services here on campus at the church, 5:30 and 7 p.m. And registration is going to open for that shortly. So a lot of great things to be celebrating that week. We'd love to get you involved and begin thinking now about those friends and family members that you would like to invite to Easter at Ebell on Sunday, April 4th this year. Hey guys, every week we like to bring you what we call a community snapshot, a little bit of a highlight of a story of stuff that's going on in and around Catalyst. And I'm going to send you guys upstairs into our youth room where you can hear some exciting news from Pastor Chris and Pastor Trevor. So check out this community snapshot.
Hey there, Catalyst Church. We did it. Thanks to all of your generosity, we have reached our fundraising goal for the completion of our upstairs youth room. About 2 months ago, we said we wanted to create a space just for our teens and our youth ministry up here. And through your generosity and by the grace of God, we were able to raise $81,771 in about 2 months so that we had the money in the bank to be able to pay cash for all of this work. So we wanted to just take a couple moments and thank all of you that gave above and beyond over the last couple of months. So many of you gave little bits here and there. Some of you gave large gifts. Many of you participated in the Chili Verde fundraiser, and we raised a bunch of money for that as well. And so we just wanted to say, man, way to go, Catalyst Church. We love your passion to reach the next generation here in Santa Paula, and we're just really excited to be moving in. Trev's going to share with you just kind of the plan and the excitement of what's happening next.
Yeah, so we're looking at just after Easter, getting a middle school class meeting up in here the week after, or the 2 weeks after Easter, and we'll be able to start using this space on Sunday mornings, having a middle school class, and then also pretty soon we'll be able to move the youth group up here on Wednesday nights. And so we're looking forward to having our own space just to be able to hang together, share the gospel, and you can see it's a super cool area, and we'll get some carpet down and the echo will go away, and we're looking forward to it. So
yeah,
thank you, Catalyst, so much.
we're stoked, man. Again, we're kind of in the final stages here. Carpet's going to be going in pretty soon. They're doing the remodel on the bathrooms. We're going to have sound and video screens up here, and we're just really excited for the future. So anyway, we just wanted to take a moment and say thank you, Catalyst, for all that you've done to make this possible, and we look forward to all the great things God's going to do. Take it easy.
Hey, I just want to reiterate what Chris and Trevor had to say in that video. Thank you so much for your generosity so that we could create a space for the youth of Santa Paula to hear the gospel message of Jesus Christ and just have a great time as they do that together. So thank you. $81,000. That is amazing to me. So again, just thank you for the ways that you participated in making that happen. That, trust me, that is an investment that is going to have years and years and years of fruit production ahead of it. So thank you so much. Hey guys, we have a little bit of a special treat for you this morning. We have, I don't know if you know this or not, but we have kind of a sister church that exists in Woodland, California, which is just a little north of Sacramento. And today we have Pastor Matt from Catalyst Woodland that's going to be sharing just a special message for all of us this morning. So I'm going to hand this off to Pastor Matt from Catalyst in Woodland. Check it out.
Hey, Catalyst Santa Paula, it is so good to be with you, even though it is remote, even though it is distant, even though it is far, it is still good to be with you. My name is Matt. I'm the lead pastor here at Catalyst Woodland, and I'm sure they gave a little intro of my backstory with you guys, but so thrilled to be teaching you today. If you don't know, a number of years ago, we moved into the space that I'm speaking from now, which was an old furniture store that we rented and gutted the whole place, and took it down to the studs and even took out the studs. So we wrecked the whole thing and then rebuilt it all. And I'm not the handiest guy in the world, and so I kind of knew what I was doing. I was more, we'll call it learning along the way. But I met with the fire marshal before we moved in and asked them, what do we need to do? And they said, well, more than anything, this place is not fire safe. And so you're going to need to get a sprinkler system. And I was like, well, that sounds easy. And so I called a company that was recommended to me. We hired them and off we went. Well, unknown to me, they were not a great company, and it turned out to be a horrible working relationship. It lasted forever, but eventually we got the pipes in. And then it came time to charge the pipes. Now, what I didn't know was that was a much more involved process than I had previously understood. They told me, oh yeah, it's easy. We'll just go out there, cut a little hole in the city main, bring some water over, bam, it's done. Now, on paper, that sounds great, but it is infinitely more complicated than that. I did not know this. And so I show up on construction day, and I'm standing out. We have an alleyway in the back of our building, and I'm watching all these guys. And they got big, bulldozers and things, and they're pulling dirt out and ripping up asphalt, and they're getting down. And finally, they expose the city water main, and they tell me, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this big contraption here. We're going to cut a little hole on the city main, and we're going to put it on there. And when we do, the city water main is going to get going, and all is going to be well, but it's going to be stopped by this little piece of pipe. It was like as big as I am, but little anyway. Put on this piece of pipe, and it's going to keep everything cool. And I was like, all right, that's great. So I'm standing there watching, amazed by the whole thing. They get this bucket, and they lower this big piece down into this hole, this big 6-foot hole, and they put it on there. They clamp it on, and then they're like, all right, we're going to cut open the city main, and all is going to be well. So they cut open the city main, and I took this picture. Now, here's what happened. As they cut the city main, that little piece that was on there that you can see, that little red piece, it failed. And as you can see, that big old hole is starting to fill with water. Now, the picture that I did not take immediately after this was that hole completely filled with water. That thing was about 8 feet deep and God knows how many feet wide, maybe 5, 6 feet wide, out in the middle of our alleyway. And so that whole thing begins to fill, and then it starts to flood over. Now, another thing that I did not know was when water pressure drops in the city's main water system, it alerts the city and tells them, you've got a problem. And so it let them know, hey, you've got a serious problem. And so out of nowhere, this very angry City of Woodland employee shows up. He was a nice dude, but not that day. And I took a picture of him because, it's what I do. I live my life documenting things, hoping one day I'll use them in a sermon. And so I took a picture. There he is right there in the red circle. And he was pissed. And you see all the pipes and everything else, and they're pumping the water out. And the reason he is there is because the construction company that I hired failed to pull a permit for this. Did not tell the city what was going on, did not shut down the alleyway, which is like an active road. Like, it was a mess. I'm standing into my knees in water. I have a very angry City of Woodland employee threatened to fine me tens of thousands of dollars for doing unpermitted work. And then he tells me if this had gone on another minute or two, I don't know if you guys have seen the Batman, the one with Bane, and he's underground and he has a hole in the city water main and he's dumping in all that stuff. That's what we would have done. We would have been Bane of the City of Woodland. We would have contaminated a large portion of the city's water supply. So to say that I was in over my head is a bit of an understatement. I was so far underwater, literally and figuratively, in this. And I was absolutely terrified. I didn't know what to do. I was so anxious. I was freaking out like, oh man, this isn't going to work. This is going to shut down the building. They're going to fine us and take all our money. They're going to revoke our permit to get in. We don't have a home. We're going to be meeting in a park. And who wants to meet in a park? And this is going to be horrible. And in Woodland, it's in the summer and it's 140 degrees. And my mind was spinning. Has that ever happened to you? When you are in a situation way over your head, and it feels crushing. It feels intimidating. It's so nerve-wracking, and you just begin to spin. You don't know what to do anymore. Well, luckily for us, Jesus speaks right into situations like that. He speaks into situations of men and women who are caught in crazy situations way in over their head. And as we'll see in a minute, he actually leads them into those places to learn a lesson. And so if you would do me a favor today, we're going to be continuing in our series. We're kind of cutting off a piece of our series for you that we're in called Fresh Air. And we're going through the book of Matthew, and we are in chapter 14, starting in verse 22. So before we get there, if you would just take a minute and pray with me, and then we will all join in together. Heavenly Father, God, we thank you so much for this opportunity just to be with each other as the Catalyst family, even though from a distance. God, I pray that you would speak in these moments to anyone for listening from anywhere who feels like they are trapped, who feels like they are in over their head, who feels like they are drowning under the weight of circumstances that they didn't foresee and that they didn't ask for. God, would you show up in a way that you have continued to throughout time and even until now, in ways that we could not even dream. It's in your name we pray. Amen. All right, verse 22, I'm going to get it going. You can feel free to open up your own Bible or on the Bible app, or we can just look on the screen and it'll all be there for you. Immediately, he is Jesus, is always Jesus. It's the Bible, come on. Immediately Jesus, made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. So it is important to recognize that Jesus had just finished feeding the 5,000. So Pretty big story in the Gospels. He got done taking just a couple fish and loaves and feeding thousands of people. And so he's kind of wrapping that show up. And he tells the disciples, hey, we need to go over to the other side. Now, we don't know exactly how this happens, but what we do know is that intentionally the word there is he made them. Notice he didn't ask them. He didn't look for suggestions. He didn't say, hey, thoughts? He just said, look, we're going. And who knows how he made them, if he pushed them, if he threw them, if he talked them into it. We don't know, but he made them do this. This was not their choice. That will become very important here in a minute. Verse 23. And after he had dismissed the crowd, so once he wrapped up that whole thing, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. He didn't join them immediately in the boat. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat by this time was a long way from the land, being beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. It was against them. So you have to at some point stop and think, well, hold on. Did Jesus really lead them into a storm? Yes, and this is not the first time and it won't be the last. Yes. Jesus knew a storm was coming. Yes, Jesus went somewhere else. And yes, Jesus made them go into the storm. Why would he do that? Why would he intentionally make them go into a storm? Because I don't know about you, but when I'm in a storm, I spend the majority of my time trying to get out or trying to find a way to not have to deal with the storm, or not deal with the consequences, or try to go around it, or make my way through it, or go back and try something else. I try to do everything I can to not be in the storm. And at no point in time do they, or let's be honest, you or I, stop and think about, well, hold on. God sent us here. God made us do this. Maybe he has something in it for us. Because one thing I've learned is there are some things you only learn in the midst of a storm. There are lessons you're not going to learn unless you go through a storm. There are things that you don't really know about God's goodness, God's grace, his peace, his presence, his love, his joy, his provision, his blessing that you cannot learn outside of adversity. But Jesus isn't there. He's up on a mountain. Now, if you were to look at pictures and maps of this region from what many scholars believe to be this mountain and this body of water that they were crossing, one thing that you would notice is up on the top of that mountain, these men are never out of his sight. While he seems distant, while he seems away, he never lost sight of them. They were never outside of his control. He saw the whole thing. He saw the storm move in. He saw them rowing and trying to get out there. He saw the whole thing. Even though he seems distant, he really isn't. And that'll become even more apparent here in a minute. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus came to them, walking on the sea. Now that's pretty cool. But before we get to that, this whole fourth watch thing, the fourth watch, all throughout an evening, there were 4 different watches. The first watch was around dinner time. Second watch was after dinner into late evening. The third watch was that kind of 12 a.m. to 3 a.m. And then the fourth watch was just before dawn in the early morning hours, maybe 3 to 6 a.m. So it is reasonable to expect that these men had been rowing for at least about 9 hours. What should have been a 2-hour, maybe at the most 3-hour journey across this lake. The wind was so strong that it had multiplied their efforts by 3 and they still weren't there. To cut to the chase, they were exhausted. And I can assume that they were clearly frustrated with what Jesus had sent them to do. You can imagine them on the boat. Like, really? I thought he said he was God. He didn't see this coming. He didn't want to be like, hey guys, give it a minute. There's going to be a huge storm. Like, what was he thinking? And they'd be so frustrated because they're in the heat of the fourth watch. And how many of you are like me and your life right now feels like you're in the fourth watch? You're at the end. You don't have much more to go. You're like, oh, I don't know how much strength I have left. I don't know how long I can keep rowing. It's been 9 hours. or 9 months or 12 months or however long it's been. I don't know. You kind of lose track of time in this whole thing. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. I'm exhausted, God. I'm done. I can't keep going another minute. And if you've ever been in that place, then you know that's something that the disciples are about to find out. Because here's what happens to most people in the fourth watch. Verse 26. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. And they said, "It's a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. Now, here's what happens when you're exhausted and when I'm exhausted in the fourth watch. Things are not as they appear. And you end up believing a lie. What is meant and sent as a blessing seems to be coming as a ghost. What is actually a trap of Satan and something meant to trip you up actually looks pretty appetizing, pretty tempting, pretty good, pretty nice. And your whole world gets mixed around and you can't think straight and all your thoughts get jumbled and you begin to look at the things of God and go, it's a ghost. It's not real. That is gonna hurt me. And everything around you, just as these men experienced, is something that you need to be afraid of. And haven't we seen that in the last season of our world? When you are exhausted, when you are at the end of your rope, you are afraid of everything. It doesn't matter what it is. You are afraid. I'm afraid. It's natural. But Jesus speaks directly to that fear. And he says this often all throughout the scriptures. But immediately, and this is the same word that is used back at the beginning. He uses it here. He'll use it 2 more times, and it's important that we notice that. I'll say why in a minute. But immediately, Jesus spoke to them, and this is what he said. "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Now, you can imagine the disciples thinking, okay, Jesus, hey, I've got an idea on how to not make us afraid. Don't put us in a storm. I've got an idea how to make sure we're not afraid. Don't leave us here. Don't send us into a storm. You don't want us to feel like we're going to die? Then don't do this. But here's the thing that I've learned, is that God's timing is always going to teach you trust. God's timing is always going to teach you trust. See, because if God's whole goal for us was comfort, then he's usually late, right? I mean, like for these guys, if God's goal for them was comfort, well, then he's late. He missed the window. He fell asleep at the wheel. He abandoned them. But that's not his goal. His goal is an increase in our faith. And if that is his goal, then he's always right on time. See, most of the time, we just want relief. We just want it to be over. We just want it to end. How many times have you said that to yourself in this last season? I just want this to end. I just want this to be over. I just want to move on. I just want to get done with this career. I just want to stop fighting with my spouse. I just want things to finally turn around in my finances. I just want all these health complications with my parents to just be over. I just want this to stop. But here's the thing, and you've probably learned this and know this to be true. The longer that you and I end up waiting, the worse that what if game gets, right? Because the longer you're waiting for something, it's all of those thoughts and those lies and those stories. My counselor this last week, and if you don't have a counselor, this is a word of God to you. Get one, because you need one. He said this great phrase. He said, what they are is ants, and you got to crush the ants. What are ants? Automatic negative thoughts. You see something and you're like, oh my gosh, what if this happens? What if they don't make it? What if there's no cure? What if the test result comes back bad? What if I get fired? What if my kid never speaks to me again? What if my marriage falls apart? What if? And noticing that you go into that space and you play the what if game, it should give you a little bit of comfort that so does our boy Peter. Peter, there's a lot about Peter. Peter, I love Peter because he does some stuff that is great, and then some other things where like, not your best look. Pete. I wonder if anyone called him Pete or just Peter. I don't know. Well, anyway. All right. And Peter, verse 28, and Peter answered him. So there's 12 guys in the boat. Well, 11 and Judas. Boo. But anyway, Peter. And he's the one, he stands up. And he goes, hey, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard this before. I've heard it a lot, and preachers love to say, well, he said if. And the fact that he said, if it's you, is just a demonstration of his lack of faith. That he doesn't have the faith to make it through, because if he had faith, he would say, Jesus, I know it's you. And since I know it's you, command me to come out on that water. But he didn't, because he said if, and if means he doesn't have faith. And Jesus says you need to have more faith, and which is fine, I guess. But think of it this way. Have you ever been in a stressful situation and you say, what if? What if this happens? What if this happens? But here's the thing I've learned. What if can go both ways. What if my marriage falls apart? What if it doesn't and it becomes the strongest season your marriage has ever had? What if God abandons me? What if he doesn't? And what if he's bringing me a blessing that I could hardly dream of? Well, what if this all fall apart? What if it doesn't? What if I go bankrupt? What if this is what God is using in my life to set me on a whole new trajectory? What if can go both ways. What if can make you give up and stay in the boat? What if can also get you to step out? And so I think there's a different way of hearing this, because one of the things that is often frustrating, at least for me, is we don't have tone in the Bible. And he could have said, well, Jesus, if this is you, then get me out on that water. If it's you, if it really is you, then let me come. Because if it's you, man, I can do anything. And the thing that Peter realized is that he was safer with him on the water than he was without him in the boat. That's good. I'm going to say that again. And you need to write it down. Peter realized that he would be safer with him walking on water than he would be sitting in the boat. He would be safer stepping out in faith and obedience into what God called him to far more than he would sitting back in that boat. So he challenges Jesus. Jesus, give me a word. Jesus takes him quite literally. Verse 29. And he said, come. So, literally, come. So Peter got out of the boat, and he walked on the water, and he came to Jesus. Now, I don't know about you, but when Jesus just responds with, come, I could see Peter being like, no, I know I said give me a word, but I didn't mean like a word. I meant like more words, like give me a paragraph, or kind of like lay it out for me. Because, and here's the thing, sometimes the deepest things that God speaks are the most simple. They're just a word. Come, go, stay, speak, forgive, pray. And here's the problem with you and I don't know if this is just a Western thing or just an American thing, but we tend to elevate confusion. Like, we tend to see confusion as the goal. Like, if we can be super duper confused, then that's probably the best thing that could ever happen to us, because we would rather learn something new than practice something old. See, we want something deep and confusing so that we don't have to do anything about it. And we listen to someone speak, or we read a book, or we read passages in the Bible, and we go, man, that was so deep. What do you mean deep? It was confusing. I didn't understand half of it. Wow. What are you going to do with it? Nothing. Some of the most simple things. God says, give. And you're like, what? I don't want to give. I need to do a word study on give to understand what give means. Give means give. Well, I see that God says forgive, but I'd really like to understand the Greek intent behind the word forgive. And if I could figure out its cultural context, it means forgive. It's very simple. It's one word. He just speaks. We don't need all these other things. And let me just speak to some of you today, because some of you are waiting on signs and confirmations and all these other things, but often what you just get is a word. And he wouldn't have said it to you if he didn't intend on seeing you through it. So sometimes he just says go, and you need to go. Sometimes he says stay, and you just need to stay. Sometimes he'll give you two words, like when you're praying about your marriage and he says, don't quit. That's it, don't quit. Well, how am I going to do that? Don't quit. Yeah, but you don't understand. Don't quit. And over again, God just speaks so simply. God is not confusing. We make it out to be so confusing, but it is just so simple. And so Peter goes to step out on the boat. Now, it is important to note that Peter gets no coaching whatsoever. And one would think that Peter would be like, come on the water. All right. How? Right? I mean, that'd be me. That's most of us. You want me to walk on water. How do we do that? I need some details. I need like left foot first, 80% of your weight, 20% back. I mean, what do you want me to do? But Jesus doesn't give detail. He just gives direction. He doesn't give detail. He just gives direction. That should inform your prayer life. Because sometimes all you get is a word. And you don't get a lot of detail. But so many of us, the development of our faith is contingent upon conditions and details. God, I hear that you want me to move into a new career, but I'm going to need some details. I'm going to need some conditions to be met. I'm going to need some things to fall in order. I'm going to need to make sure that 10 people come out of nowhere and tell me, I heard that you're supposed to do this. And we just wait for all this detail. And he's like, listen, I'm not giving you detail. I gave you direction. I told you to speak to your child and try to change the trajectory of their life with a word of encouragement. I told you just to speak into their life. You need to give you all the details. Just go, just be obedient. I mean, I think back to when we started this church. I mean, it was wonderful. I loved being with you guys and serving on staff with Chris and Jason and Chris Matthews and Dave Lippard and everyone else who's a part of your church now. I loved it then. I still love it now, but I loved working there. But God just gave my wife and I a word. Go. And we were like, cool, but we're going to need a whole lot of detail. And we're going to need some confirmation. Some conditions got to be right. And he was like, right, go. Go where? So we looked for months and months and months all around the country and eventually landed on Woodland. And it was like, well, Woodland? Yes, go. But where? We don't have any friends. We don't know anyone. We've never met anyone. We've never even been there. But, right, I know. Go. Right, but when and how are we going to do this and how are we going to pay for things? Who's going to even come to this church? Just go. And so we went. Now, I'd like to say that every time God speaks, I'm that obedient. I'm not. And I certainly wasn't in that story. Just on the post end, I like to tell it in a way that makes me sound a bit more obedient than I actually was. There was a lot of pouting and whining and arguing with God. But we'll just kind of clean that up and be like, God said go, and I boldly went. How about that? But so often in our life, God just gives us a word. He just speaks by the power of his Spirit to our soul and says, this is what I'm calling you to do. I'm calling you to be obedient. I'm not asking your suggestions. I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm not waiting to give you a bunch of detail. And I don't necessarily know that I'm going to change any of the conditions in your life. I just want you to obey. So verse 30, Peter obeys, but it doesn't go as well as he had hoped. When he had saw the wind, I don't know how intense wind has to be for you to see it. I'm going to guess very. And so it's very windy. And so he sees the wind. And so he gets caught up in conditions that aren't ideal. He gets caught up in some unfavorable conditions, some unfavorable circumstances. And he was afraid. And as he began to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Now, here's another thing about the Bible. I'm going to assume that that's not what Peter said. If you are walking out towards Jesus on a raging ocean and you are walking on water and then you are suddenly not walking on water, I'm going to guess you say something that is rather uncouth. But the writers of the Bible probably didn't put that in the Bible, so it was more like, what did he say? He said, beep, but no, all right, well, we'll put Lord save me. And like, okay, that sounds better. So they put in there, Lord, save me. And sometimes there's going to be some circumstances around you that just don't seem to fit, just don't seem to work. And you need to ignore the wind. You need to ignore the circumstances. You need to ignore all the things that are competing for the voice of God in your head. You need to silence all the things that are telling you, no, don't obey, don't listen. That's crazy. You're insane. Don't do that. They don't deserve to be forgiven. She shouldn't be someone that you actually give your heart to again. Why would you speak to him after he treated you like that? They don't deserve that kind of love. They don't deserve that kind of grace. All those voices are the wind, and you need to ignore it. And see, what we love to do is we love to place our security in a place that has favorable conditions, right? We say, all right, these conditions aren't favorable. These circumstances are not good. So I'm going to go find a place of security where those don't exist. Well, sometimes the place of security is not where there's favorable circumstances, where there no problems exist, where everything goes swimmingly. But the place of security is when you are in complete obedience to God's will. When he speaks and you say, yes, Lord, I will follow. I will do whatever you ask. And so Peter does. He steps out of the boat. And in verse 31, we see as he's sinking, as he's falling, Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took a hold of him. And he said, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Now, I don't know about you, but Jesus, and we don't know how far off he was. Clearly, he was close enough to where he could catch him. We also don't know how far Peter made it. We don't know if he made it like right up to him. We don't know if he was a ways away, but we do know that he was at some point close enough to where Jesus reached out and grabbed him. And when Jesus reached out and grabbed him, we don't know how far he fell. If he just had his pinky toe like begin to slip, or he was actually like up to his neck, we don't know. But he grabs him and he immediately, the word immediately makes me think he didn't fall that far. Immediately reaches out and grabs him and he says to him, "Oh, you of little faith." Now, I don't know about you. To me personally, that's offensive. Because if I were Peter, I'd look at Jesus and be like, me, the little faith? Why aren't you talking to the 11 dudes in the boat who didn't even get out? The guys who were sitting back there being like, whoa, man, that's pretty cool. They're the ones who have little faith. I at least got out of the boat. How could you think that I have little faith? And I'll tell you what, if I read that scripture, and Jesus looks at Peter and says, "Peter, oh, you have little faith," we're all screwed. Like if that's an example of little faith, getting out of a boat and walking on water, then we have no chance. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't even like sit down to pray for 5 minutes without my mind just spinning and having all kinds of checklists to make and making sure I do this and, pulling out my phone and texting this person, which is a horrible thing to do because next thing you know, you're playing a game and you're off the deep end. Little faith. Oh, you of little faith. Jesus uses that phrase a lot throughout the Gospels. And I didn't see this until this last week. I've always took a little bit of offense to that phrase and then I always thought, okay, well, little faith. Well, he needs to have more faith. That little is somehow talking about the volume of his faith. That if he could manufacture more, if he could put in a little more effort, if he could multiply the faith that he already has, if he could go back for a season or wait for a while and wait till his faith grows, then maybe he could try again. But then I learned that there are two words in the original language that are both translated little when it comes to English. The first word is the word that we would think of. little, that it's small, that it's not a lot, that it's in reduced volume. Little faith. But that's not the word that is used here. The word that is used here is another form of little, which means not sustained, not long lasting, not enough to get you through. In other words, the faith that he had was enough to get him out of the boat, but not to get him to the goal. It was enough to allow him to take that first step, but not continue through. And some of us, if we're honest, that's the kind of faith we have. We have faith to be generous in January, but February, March, those are tough. We have faith to have that initial conversation with a coworker about things of faith, but the follow-up, we have faith enough to make that first counselor appointment and go and sit down, but it's weird and I don't know, and it's really expensive and not go back. We have faith to kind of start things but not sustain things. But here's the good thing about Peter. Even though he failed the test, and often you and I do as well, he still got the lesson. And that is that regardless, God sustains. No matter how much faith you bring to the table, God always sustains. God is the one who is there ready to step in and pull you up. He is the one ready to step in and rescue you. He is the one who is ready to sustain you no matter how much faith that you bring into the game. God sustains. And so verse 32, he brings them back to the boat, and when they get into the boat, the wind ceased. Now, I love that, and I often haven't given it a lot of thought. But just imagine for a moment the disciples. When they sit down in the boat and the wind stops, you think they looked at each other and were like, why didn't you stop that 8 hours ago? Why didn't you stop that then? Because he could have. He could have stopped the storm whenever he wanted. He could have stopped the storm right as Peter was getting out. He could have stopped the storm right as they set off and they never would have known there was a storm headed their way. He could have stopped it whenever he wanted. But the bigger idea was that he wanted to stop the storm inside of them before he stopped the storm around them. He wanted to stop the storm that was going on in their heart, in their soul, in their mind, in the what-if game, to inspire more faith long before he stopped the storm around them, showing that again and again and again, you can have peace in the midst of difficult circumstances. You can have faith in what seems like an impossible way forward. And it all leads us to this point, that it led them there as well, and we'll end with this. Those in the boat, they worshiped him, and they said, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Now, that simple declaration doesn't seem like much. Obviously, he just had Peter walk on water. Of course he's the Son of God. Are you kidding me? Here's the problem with that, though. As far as we know, that is the first time recorded in the Gospels that the disciples actually acknowledge Jesus as the Messiah, that they acknowledge Jesus as the Son of God. At this point in time, they had been walking with him for 2 years. They had seen him walk through town and restore people's sight. They had seen him feed thousands of people with a happy meal. They had seen all sorts of stuff, but it was in that moment when their faith didn't have enough to get them to the end goal, and Jesus stepped in and rescued them and said, "Oh, you had enough faith to get out, but not enough faith to sustain you. It's okay, I'll carry you." It was then and only then that they saw Jesus for who he was, the Son of God. And it's in that moment that all of their worry turned to worship. And maybe for you, in this season, I don't know what you're going through, but what I do know is there is an opportunity for you to look at Jesus and say, "I haven't seen this before, but my current circumstances only exist to confirm that you are the Son of God." See, because anytime you walk into a storm, it can do one of a few things. It can either push you away from God or it can draw you towards him. And a lot of that has to do with you. Jesus is up on the mountainside watching. Jesus is out on the water walking towards. Jesus is there ready to grab and ready to rescue. Are you and I going to take a step forward? And when he gives the invitation, come, to say, okay, I'm going to put my faith in you and declare him the Son of God, that he is actually Lord. He is who he said he was, the Son of God, wrapped in flesh, sent to earth to die on a cross, be buried in a grave, rise 3 days later so that you and I could stand before God in righteousness, and that all of our sin placed on his shoulders so that you and I can have a right standing with God, and that we can stand before him and he can look at us and say, well done. I love you, my son, my daughter. And that's the invitation, open always to everyone. And if you've never taken that step, if you've always allowed your circumstances to dictate your faith, to say, well, you know, my circumstances aren't going well, therefore I can't step out in faith, then maybe today is the day that changes. And you say, you know what? Forget my circumstances. If they've brought me to a point where I can see Jesus clearly, that I'm going to put my faith in him. And if you've never done that, make today the day. Or if you have and you've done that a long time ago and you just need to step out again and remember what it's like to move in faith, then take that step. Whatever God is asking you to do, whatever challenge he's given to you, whatever word he's placed on your heart, to step into that. Let us pray. Heavenly Father God, I thank you so much for sending your Son to show us that even in the midst of our storms, you are there, you are present, and you are calling us to come. That whatever level of faith we have, that you are there to pick us up and take us the rest of the way. God, if there's anyone under the sound of my voice who has never initially placed their faith in you and declared that publicly through baptism, God, that they would step forward, that they would send in an email, that they would let the staff know that, you know what, today is the day that everything changed. I'm going to step out, I'm going to place my faith in you. And for all of those who've been following Jesus for some time, but just need to take a step of faith, maybe need to follow after that word, to go, to stay, to forgive, to love, to give grace, to give, to be generous, to love, to heal, to walk away. God, that you would give us the courage to do that, to follow boldly after you. God, we give you thanks for this time. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Well, thank you guys so much for the pleasure of being with you. I can't wait till I can do it again in person. We'll see you soon. God bless. Love you guys.
Hey guys, thanks again for joining us for Catalyst Online today. Really hope that the message that Pastor Chris from Catalyst Woodland was meaningful to you, give you some stuff to think about, some stuff to chew on, some stuff to pray about this week in your life. Thanks again for hanging out with us online. We really appreciate that. And don't forget, if you joined us late in the service here, Easter's coming, Ebell Park, April 4th, 10 a.m., and then 2 Good Friday services, 5:30 and 7. If you want to help us out for anything leading up to Holy Week, text Easter SP to 97000. We'll get in touch with you. Guys, thank you. We love you. We'll see you soon. God bless.